Welcome to Christian Statesman. I'm your host, Zach Wagner, and this is episode 89, Losing Faith Part 2, Destruction of the Middle Class. As outlined in our last episode, there is a continuing loss of faith in the political, social, and economic systems in America. People are losing faith that future opportunities for freedom and prosperity will present themselves. Many Americans, especially the young, are looking to government for solutions and are actually warming to such destructive ideas as universal basic income and other political boondoggles that will ultimately not free them, but enslave them. To understand how this could be possible, we need to look at a bit more history and an understanding of the deliberate destruction of the middle class. If you were born after 1980, you will have little public education or experiential understanding of the economic dynamics from the last century or so in America. Prior to the opening of the 20th century, America was a primarily agrarian society. 3 out of 4 Americans were born and raised on farm or ranch land. After World War I, a population shift began as many moved into cities for economic opportunity. You did not get rich on a farm. You ate what you grew or hunted, and you lived year to year praying for a good crop. It was a bit more than subsistence, but it was certainly not an extravagant life. As America became more and more industrialized, production jobs in and around metropolitan manufacturing centers provided a pathway to what has been described as the American middle class. This meant you could earn enough with manual labor jobs or semi-skilled industrial production positions to buy a home, raise a family, and retire after 30-plus years with a pension that would see you through your elderly years. The home may not have been large or luxurious, but it was a solid foundation to raise a successful family and secure a solid living. These opportunities usually did not require a college education, simply some common sense and a defined work ethic. My generation had a variety of choices: college and a white-collar type of professional career, or trade school and a blue-collar pathway. Both added up to the ability to carve a path through the world with the necessities met and a little left over. But in the 90s, thanks to the Clintons and a Democrat Congress, these opportunities began to leave our country with the onset of NAFTA. Large manufacturers began to ship their factories to Mexico, then Taiwan, then mainland China, and elsewhere. Companies that chose to keep production in the United States soon joined the outsourcing or perished, not being able to keep up profitably with cheap foreign goods made by cheap labor. The $20 an hour job in Detroit or Toledo gave way to the $2 a day laborer in Shenyang, China. As these jobs rapidly disappeared, it began to carve a large hole in the American middle class. No longer could a man work in a factory for 30 years and retire with enough to live on. The farmer that defined our country a century before had already been replaced by corporate farming and imported undocumented labor. Now the blue-collar workers were finding themselves with nowhere to go for employment. We have already noted that GM moving their future electric car production to Mexico will negatively impact American jobs. This is just another illustration of the destruction of our middle class. It does not take a well-degreed economics professor to understand that an economy that ceases to produce fundamental necessities soon ceases to be a viable economy. Thus, the gutting of America's middle class is symbolic of a larger systemic problem that threatens the entire economy, with the exception of those elites at the top profiting from the pool of cheap overseas labor. It is the byproduct of the globalist strategies antithetical to an ethical free market and the United States. The consequence of this trend cuts far and deep. Perhaps one additional illustration should be noted by such bounteous luminaries as LeBron James. As he shills Nike apparel, he might want to take note of the millions of Chinese Uyghurs being held in Chinese detention camps. Besides the human rights violations and unspeakable crimes committed against these people, it should be noted that many of them are being rehabilitated as unpaid slave laborers that manufacture some of the basketball detritus Mr. James is so well compensated for promoting. Let that sink in a little. The blue-collar laborer who worked for the American shoe manufacturer of the 1950s, who married, bought a home, raised children, and spent a portion of his earnings over his lifetime buying other American goods and services, is now replaced by a slave laborer working as a captive in a communist country that will take the proceeds from the selling of their goods and build a government and military force patently antagonistic to the United States. Simply wonderful for the ethical proliferation of free market capitalism, is it not? We must awaken from this nightmare of our own self-funded destruction. Donald Trump in his time as president sought to reverse this situation. Make America Great Again was more than a slogan. It was an ethic of returning middle-class jobs into the neighborhoods of America for workers of all ethnicities. The Biden regime is now working feverishly to set things back to the benefit of the internationalists that have been robbing us for some time. GM is just one of the many dominoes that will fall if allowed to continue, and soon our middle class will fade into the pages of history. Thank you for being with us. Please subscribe, tell your friends, and as always, have a blessed day.